Good morning, everyone. Yeah, just a quick update. Thanks everyone for joining. We moved our developer meetings to 9 a.m. UTC. So as it was announced in Keptn Slack, now it will be a regular time for all the time slots. So there is announcement in general channel on Slack with the summary of how the meetings are going to happen going forward. And Bevi is updated as well as Keptn calendar. So please take a look if you want to participate in the meetings. And as always, everyone is welcome. And I'm not sharing my screen, right?
No.
Well, but that's right. Okay. So yeah, if you want, the announcement is here. So it's in the general channel and the Keptn calendar and community meetings. Everything is up to date. So take a look there. Another heads up that next week on Wednesday we will have a presentation about my Supermon and Keptn integration. So we have integration service, and I will announce the meeting today, but it will happen at the same time, 9 a.m. UTC on Wednesday. So developers are welcome to join if you want to chat about the integration, developer experience, etc., etc. And actually, that's it from me. And where's our agenda? Definitely had a window for that. All right. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So Johannes, Giovanni, would you like to make an update about 013?
Yes, so unfortunately we discovered a small regression on the quality gates use case and we fixed it. And now we are in the process of doing the release. It will come later today or tomorrow morning. And also contains some other small bug fixes that were discovered, especially with the OpenIDC implementation.
Well, it's to be expected because it's a feature which was just shipped in 013.
Yeah.
So some stabilization period would be required because it's a big change. And yeah, thanks to everyone who fixes all these issues. So yeah, is any help needed with regards to facilitating reviews or whatever?
No, I think we are on schedule. All PRs are merged beside one for the logout, which will be most likely today or tomorrow in, and then we can press the release button.
And how much time does it take now to ship the release after the button?
Around 1 hour in total with all the test pipeline.
So, anyway, so well, whomever deployed 013, I guess they had an opportunity to revert if it impacted them. So I think it's okay. We got some comments in the Slack channel, but everything is contained by now. So thanks to everyone who is working on these issues. Okay, any other news? I guess not. Then we can just switch to demos. So
yeah, for that, Flo, could you take over first? I think. Oh no, no, I can share. No, it's fine. My share screen button was grayed out.
Yeah, and maybe only one person can share the screen.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Sure. Okay, now then I'll go ahead and start. Okay. Yeah, so my sprint was mostly fixing small issues in the pipelines. So I'm gonna get right into it. The first PR is about fixing our OCI labels in all Docker images. We actually had the labels before, but I think Giovanni noticed that if you press if you call Docker inspect on one of our images, the labels are actually all meshed together into one label. And that was, yeah, actually a pretty minor issue. So now they look all fine, key value pairs as they should be. And the fix was actually to remove some white spaces. So that was pretty much it. I just went through all the images and fixed all the different white spaces in between there. Then next up, we're using Go test sum now for all Go-based services. That's basically a command line wrapper for the Go test command, which gives you some nicer log output and all that stuff. So now if we check the unit tests for any, let's go to the secret service, whatever, you would actually get a nice summary of all the different unit tests that were run with a nice green or red or yellow tag if they passed or failed. So it's much easier now to actually find failing tests in a whole lot of log messages in the CI pipeline. Yeah, so that was introduced for all the different Go-based services. So again, basically, I went through all the Docker images, all the Docker files in this case, and added the go test sum command. What else? Oh yeah, we had some label cleanup in our Helm chart. So we actually had already some helper functions to set up common labels for different resources that we have in our Helm chart. But actually, they were not used so much. So especially in the RBAC file, we have our like service accounts and role bindings and stuff. Basically, all the different resources had all the labels duplicated. So basically, I replaced all those with the common set of labels and just included them from the helper functions. Yeah, which in the end doesn't actually change much in the Helm chart itself, in the outcome, but it reduces our lines of code a little bit and makes them more readable. And then one of the bigger changes I did, we have a new Keptn dev Docker Hub organization now. And that's going to be used to push all our development images. So everything that comes from any CI runs except for release builds is going to be pushed to the Keptn dev registry instead of the Keptn registry. And this has the result that the normal Keptn registry should actually be clean and only has our released images in one place.
One practical question. So Keptn dev is generally helpful. It's nice to have this repository as a playground, but at the same time, it might make sense to actually use GitHub packages going forward, because in this case, you can set up identification for particular repository, and also it's much more easier from developer experience. You can connect GitHub actions to deployments. So was this option discussed? Because
for the Keptn dev Docker Hub organization, not really. I didn't actually think about it because we have everything under the Keptn organization, and the packages would actually be, again, we would have this like merging of release and dev images, which I wanted to prevent basically with this. So we do actually have our released images on GitHub as well, but not the dev ones for now. But that's a good point, yeah, worth looking into, of course.
Yeah, because if we create Keptn dev, I guess we would need to apply to Docker for another sponsorship so that anonymous users do not experience download limits. So if we want to introduce any CI flow that pulls images from Docker Hub, it might become a problem. We passed through that in Jenkins, let's say 6 months ago, because we also had Jenkins for Val Docker Hub organization where we forgot to request sponsorship, and our pipelines became quite unstable after that. So just speaking from my experience, but yeah, maybe just going to use GitHub packages would be reasonable for us.
Yeah. So as far as I know, we are not sponsored anyways. Yeah. Or like open source tag basically on Docker Hub. We just have a free organization. And actually in the pipelines, we always use our Keptn bot user, so we are authenticated and we don't run into limits. So that should be fine. But yeah, users of course could still run into the limits. That's true. Yeah, so maybe GitHub would actually be a good option there.
So maybe
Yeah.
we can discuss that later. But yeah, anyway, it's really great to have it. And do you plan to enable this GitHub organization for services? Because they might also benefit from having the staging repository for experiments.
It's not planned yet, but it makes sense, of course, yeah. To also push integrations there. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, well, maybe at that point we should actually think about the GitHub registry for sure, because permission model, etc., is going to become a pain. So, for example, in Jenkins for Eval, we just say that whomever, we don't guarantee any security of these images because everyone on our CI instances can push to any image. And yeah, it comes with disclaimers, but it's, let's say, suboptimal.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, it's actually restricted anyways. So it's only the Keptn bot user that can push there for either of the organizations on Docker Hub.
Understood. Thank you.
Cool. If there's no other questions, I will go to my last pull request, which is that I fixed the cleanup of our static Kubernetes, not the static ones, but the integration test resources that we are using on our static clusters. So this was all fine actually, until we noticed that we also use cluster roles and cluster role bindings, which are not namespaced, of course, and that had the effect that they were never cleaned up on the static clusters. So basically, I fixed that by not only checking the namespaces for the Keptn test namespace here, but also cluster roles and cluster role bindings, and then I cleaned up those as well. So now all those resources get, depending on what run it was, they either get a 3-day time to live or a 6-hour time to live, or they're actually deleted outright, depending on if it was a scheduled integration test one, a manual one, or what was the last one. If the run actually succeeded all the way, then the stuff is deleted right away. Yeah, and here also I fixed a small issue with this read array function that I use here. Basically, if you don't get anything out of there, it will still put out some white space, and I couldn't actually check the array to be just empty because it always returned that it's not empty, even though there was only a white space inside. So now I fixed that by still iterating over it and then having every single item in there replace the white spaces and then check if it's there or not. Yeah, and that's it from me. Handing over the floor. You're super quiet.
Yeah. We don't hear you.
It worked for me to change the audio and back better.
Yeah, doesn't quite work.
Maybe we just move on and let Flo fix.
Yeah, we
stuff
can
and
move on, and from maybe it makes sense to try reconnecting because I'm not sure what's going on. So who's next then?
I'm next. So if Flo let me share my screen. Yeah, it's great. Good. So hopefully you're receiving the screen.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so my sprint was basically about, or mainly about two features. The first one is regarding feature about authentication to remote Git repository via SSH and a public-private key. Yeah, I assume that all users know this type of authentication from classical Git repositories. I have a simple example how to use it. Yeah, until now we have supported only usage with token and the HTTPS protocol. You can see an example command here. So when creating a project, user will add the Shipyard, the Git username, Git token, and Git remote URL. Now, from now and from the next version, we will support also the private public key authentication. So when creating a project, the user will add username, then a private key, the Git remote URL with the SSH protocol, and voluntary also Git private key passphrase, as the private key can be encrypted also with the passphrase. Yeah. Other than that, user needs to upload his public key to the remote Git repository, and therefore the private key will be used as an authentication method to the remote Git repository. So all the pushes, pulls, clones, fetches, it will be used for this.
I have one
Yeah.
question to that.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, what happens if you provide private key and password and also a Git token there?
Actually, this is not allowed due
Okay.
to other protocol. This is checked.
Okay, so it will just ignore it.
It will not ignore it. You will get an error
Okay.
that you cannot use private key and token at the same time.
Ah, okay, cool. Thanks.
So yeah, no problem.
I
So
have a
does
question
this
about
need to
the.
be?
Please,
Go
Meg.
ahead. No,
For the APIs, how can I specify the file for the private key?
As in the same manner, it is base64 encoded
Okay, it's
content
not
of the file.
a post with the content, but
No.
it's a base 64. Okay, thanks.
just trying to look at the contributing documentation that we've got for Keptn, which is kind of a mess. But we have a little bit of information about GitHub, in the Keptn contributing .doc. Does this need to be added to that for people to know?
Yeah, I assume it should be added there.
Okay.
Cool. So,
So
no other
do we have it?
questions
Do we
regarding?
for that, or how do we? Or we'll just talk.
I have actually no idea how updating the documentation goes in this manner. To be
I will
honest.
take care of that, Meg, don't worry.
Nice, thank you.
Good. So feel free to ask about
Yeah, I
this.
think what we actually need to do is for pull request template, add a checklist, what needs to be done. So that basically definition of done, so common things like if the change needs test automation, it's done. If the change needs documentation update, it's done. If there is a need in tutorial updates, it's done. Because at least, downstream pull requests are created. So basically, ideally, when we merge changes, there should be already staged changes to documentation, etc., so that we are sure that everything gets delivered as one chunk. So if the team agrees with that, we can actually try it out. At the same time, it might create some complications because, well, you cannot just merge the change. You also, basically, we follow documentation as code, but multi-repository one. What do you think about that?
So you mean that you actually need to merge everything at the same time?
well, not merge everything at the same, but at least have everything prepared. So, for example, we have a change towards the upcoming release. And before merging this change, we set expectation that there is a documentation pull request, which is already staged, so that we don't have it in the backlog for some time later in the cycle to create it, and sometimes forget, as we all do. But yeah, we could just set basically a checklist of what commonly needs to be updated in other repositories.
Yeah,
And
the
select-
problem with this specific case, though, is that the resource service is not yet. So it's not for the configuration service, which is the base service which is shipped with Keptn. This is for the resource service, which is in beta. So it's not yet stable. And we will make the documentation when we will mark this as a stable service.
Agreed.
Okay.
It also makes sense. Maybe we could just keep this documentation in a README IND inside the repository. And well, I would argue that it should be actually the final place of documentation. So if we really talk documentation as code, our current organization, when we have separated documentation repository, is actually wrong. So we could eventually, we had a discussion about using Hunter, etc., for aggregating documentation from multiple repositories. So it's completely off the scope of for this particular pull request, but maybe we could try putting documentation at least inside the same repository, the same pull request, and then we figure out when to move it over.
Because what happens if so this will be let's go. What if I need to go back and make a change to 0.12 or 0.11? After that, will I use the old methods, or would I have to do this release that was released with the old methods?
You mean on a documentation level?
Right. Just as the user, I mean, I guess my question is whether when we need to retain any information about how we used to do it, or when this goes in, it's going to affect everything and it's universal.
Okay, I get your point.
It's only going to be for the new release.
Yeah.
So all the old ones stay as they were.
Where we haven't necessarily documented this real well anyhow, so. But I mean, we need to at least, we need to be specific, when we say in release, so, forward, you do it this way. And we may need to add to that, in the older releases, you do it this way.
But we do have the documentation split by releases anyways. That's what I meant.
Not all of it. I don't think.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, for there, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I'm not, I mean, I think there's some awkwardness about how the concepts and stuff like that is not release specific. The quick start, there's a bunch of stuff that's not in the releases, so.
So I suggest,
which is another problem. It is a problem, I think, in and of itself, but it's reality now. So we'll be tweaking.
Take this problem offline. So
Yes.
it's definitely a chunk of work to do. I made a note to just suggest an update to pull request template. And if we agree that we, for pre-release services, we could just start staging all the documentation in READMEs for these pre-release services, I think it would be convenient, I think, for everyone, because for evaluation, we can just refer them to this documentation. Hopefully, at some point, we will just keep it there forever.
Why in READMEs and not contributing? I'm just curious. I thought the stuff for contributors would go into the contributing.md file.
I think it's rather a developer feature in this case.
Yeah, in this case, it's more a user feature than a developer feature.
Okay.
Yeah. But, so, yeah.
We don't have to solve it all now, and we're not going to solve it all at once, but we'll move it that way.
So, yeah, thanks everyone for the conversation, and I have some items to follow up. Yeah, so moving on then.
So probably I can continue. Yeah, the second feature I was working on was supporting the git commit ID flag when triggering the evaluation. This is also possible only in the resource service, as the configuration service, or when Keptn using the resource service as the configuration service. Yeah, so really short example. Actually, the aim of this feature is to make consistent resources through the long evaluations runs. So when a user triggers an evaluation, we transfer a few hours, and in the meantime, someone will change the state of the Git repository. The evaluation might get cracked. So when adding the git commit ID, it will always, during the whole evaluation, it will point to the specific state of the Git repository defined by the git commit ID. So the previous usage is without the git commit ID, as you know it. The new feature adds the git commit ID with a specified ID. And yeah, actually, the evaluations is run in this kind of state of the Git repository until the end. The evaluation can be used also without the git commit ID. It is voluntary, but it is actually highly recommended for all types of reasons. Yeah, that's kind of.
I have a question
everything.
for this. What
Yes.
if I put a wrong commit ID or an hash that does not exist? What would be the default behavior?
The git commit ID would not be found, so probably we will get an error that the Git repository cannot check out the specified git commit ID, so it cannot be pulled, I think.
Yeah, 404.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Can I ask, is the deployment of the sequence also available, even though Helm service cannot handle the commit ID? Or
No, it's not available.
Okay.
We faced some problems with the Helm service, where fetching the resources, or Helm charts, which were uploaded as tarbles to the Git remote repository, was not actually possible using the Git commit ID. So this functionality we do not have yet.
So not even the other actions in the deployment sequence got the commit ID?
No. Keptn trigger deployment does not work with git commit ID.
Another question. Can I also use the shortened version of the ID, or do I always have to put the...
I've also the shorter version.
Okay.
Good. So if no other questions are, I can hand it over to the next one. So thanks.
Flo, can you share?
All right, then I guess test 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yes.
You sound very
Excellent.
powerful.
We have a nice
Okay.
echo. I think it's from Giovanni.
Yeah, I think it's from Giovanni, yeah. Okay. I still hear myself. All right. Then I get it from my... this is very disturbing. I just try to ignore it. Okay. So for me, it's 3 PRs this week. So the first one is fix for the distributor. Let's just have a look. So due to some recent changes in the distributor and the Go utils, we kind of introduced a default HTTP timeout of 5 seconds, which especially for the Helm service was a little bit too restrictive, because when it needed to update resources like the Helm chart on the upstream Git repository, when using an external Git repository like on GitHub, this timeout value was exceeded very easily. So therefore, the the default timeout has been increased to 30 seconds. But of course, for these kinds of values, it's hard to find a one-size-fits-all solution. So that's why I also added this environment variable here that can be set in the distributor. So if that needs to be adapted, then this is the place where it can be done. Are there any questions? All right.
Is this?
If not,
I have one
let's
question.
continue.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Is this also provided in the Helm values to configure?
In the Helm values, not yet. No, there it's not.
Okay. Maybe we should add it there for like user customization. I don't know if it's something that a
Probably
user
further
actually
down the
would.
line, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Cool. Thanks.
Okay. The next one is a fix in the Helm chart. So when installing Keptn, we are using default security context that's used for most of the services. And there are two special cases like the bridge and the API gateway, which need slightly different configurations than the other ones. And the problem we had here that due to these being hard-coded in the Helm chart, for example, on more restrictive environments like OpenShift with security constraints enabled, this led to some incompatibilities. And that's why we added the possibility to define the security context, both for the pod security context and the container security context via the values YAML. So these are the default. So they have been added for the bridge and the API gateway and the common security context. And if there are no further specified, then these default values are used, but now users will have the possibility to override them by providing these values during the Helm upgrade or Helm install command. Any questions about that? All right, then let's continue with the next one. So this is still work in progress, but nearing its completion. So this is about the introduction of a new data model for the Shipyard controller. This has or will have two big advantages. So the first one is that this new data model will support thread safety, which means that this will allow us to run the Shipyard controller with multiple replicas without each of the replicas interfering with each others during the execution of a sequence. So that's the first benefit we expect from that. And the second one is also quite nice. So it will make the Shipyard controller and its logic actually a lot more easy, because during this pull request, I noticed that I can get rid of quite a number of collections that were previously used and kind of made the logic of the Shipyard controller unnecessarily complex. And this has been simplified, so that will hopefully also contribute to the Shipyard controller being easier to maintain going forward. All right, any questions about that? If not, I will mute myself again and
I have a question for
Yeah.
that. How many breaking changes there are for this new model?
This new model is only used internally. So I'm pretty sure that there are, at this point, no breaking changes for the user.
Thank you.
Next one, please.
Sure, I'll go. Can you hear me? Good.
Yes.
So the first thing I worked this sprint was a simple bug we have with integration test, basically because we changed the name of the file to something which is not actually the real name of the file. One of the tests could not run. And since I was there, I also removed some folder dependency we had among the tests. So now locally we can run all of the tests in any order. Then I wanted to show something that maybe can be interesting for the community, that thanks to Moritz having now a dev repo for our Helm chart, we can now deploy any PR or the master PR with Helm in a very easy way. So now in the documentation under install master, anybody can copy the right commands to deploy on a cluster their current images. And then the final thing I worked this time, even though it's still waiting for last integration test, is adding leader election to Shipyard controller. The problem here is that dispatching of sequence and events is something that happens periodically and that cannot be done by multiple instances of Shipyard. So there was a proof of concept from Florian that was trying to use the Kubernetes API to solve this. I implemented some changes and try to test whether or not this worked on OpenShift. It can work on OpenShift, but the library that we would need to use is 0.0.0 version of Kubernetes, which doesn't sound very safe. So instead of that, I've added a simple disable leader election in the deployment so that we can avoid having multiple replicas of shipyards in case of things such as mini shift. There is another observation. I did some extensive tests for what concerns the concurrency problem with the Graceful shutdown. Basically, we have around 30-60 second delay introduced by the Graceful shutdown at shutdown of the service. So if this happened with the Shipyard controller that in that moment is in charge, what will happen is that for around 30 seconds, there will be no replica of Shipyard that is handling the sequences. Nothing will be lost because of NUTS. Now everything is fine, but there may be this delay in handling of the sequences. Yeah, I think that's it from my side.
I have a question for that. What happens if I'm using multiple replicas and the flag for disabling the leader election?
I made it impossible in the deployment.
Good.
So the deployment checks for the flag or if the version of Kubernetes is too low.
Perfect.
And if the version is too low, it won't deploy. Nothing else, then I stop sharing.
Okay. Then I will share my screen. Okay. So I'm currently still in progress. So this issue is still in progress. So PR review is basically in progress. The new feature for the bridge to trigger a sequence. So I would just shortly demo what this is about. So it's now possible really from the bridge to directly trigger a sequence, either from the sequencer screen, there's a button here. I can click it, or from the environment directly. So it will look like this. In the environment screen, there's a button trigger new sequence, then the form opens. It's possible to trigger a delivery, an evaluation, or a custom sequence. I will go through all three, basically. So delivery is more or less straightforward. I select the service I want to trigger the sequence for, the stage, and then I can put in the image, the tag, and labels, values. I will skip this for now. also values if you put in something weird. It has to be valid JSON, so this is validated. And if I click now on trigger sequence, it's sent to the API, and you can see it's already started here in the sequence screen. Same goes for evaluation, so service, stage, and so you can now choose if you want to use the time frame with hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and nanoseconds. Also, you can, for example, I would put it for the last 5 minutes. If I do not put any started, it will start now. Otherwise, I can say, okay, yesterday at 12. Please start at 12. So this is parsed into the ISO format directly. So do not wonder if the time is not that what you put in here. And yeah, let's trigger it. Yeah, it's now waiting because delivery is not finished yet. You can also, I will just show this shortly. Instead of the time frame, use start end time. So it's basically the same. Also, if I put in here the start date for the 24th and the end date for 23rd, you will get an error that the start date has to be before the end date, basically. So I will just do it like that. Sorry. Yeah, whatever. And if I trigger sequence, it's so we have already seen this. It's basically the same. It will trigger an evaluation with the given time. Yeah, and for custom sequences, this will be changed because it does not make sense, but it came to me today. For custom sequence, it's defined in the shipyard per stage, and if you choose the stage here, it may be that the custom sequence is not available for this stage, so I have to think about how to solve this. But let's do it anyways for stage hardening, because I have a delivery direct sequence configured there, and I can also just trigger it, and it's here. Any questions?
Yes, one question.
Yeah.
So there is a new Keptn enhancement proposal submitted by Johannes about retriggering the sequences. So the question is whether you consider aligning UI between this change and the upcoming cap by Johannes, because it's definitely something that might be needed in the future.
But retrigger sequence is just a button.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the UI in order to specify data.
But so every time you retrigger, it would be always with the same parameters, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the questions would be whether when you retrigger the sequence, would you have information to actually what parameters are? For example, somebody will eventually implement parameter like to which environment to deploy, etc. And when you retrigger the sequence, you might make a mistake and retrigger for improper environment. So for example, in Jenkins, if you have ever seen a rebuild plugin, when which is basically the same as retrigger sequence to some extent, when you open it, you see all the parameters in read-only mode. So maybe from user experience standpoint, it's something that one would expect for retrigger sequence too. Yep. It's not a blocker for this pull request. It's rather a question for the upcoming cap from Johannes, so that maybe we could integrate it there right away as an expectation.
Yeah, would make sense to at least think about how to present information. Yeah.
The information is partially there already, because you can always select the triggered event for the specific sequence, and you can look at the event data. But we need
at
to follow
least
up.
have a short summary of we
Yes.
will trigger an evaluation for this time frame from this date on, for example. Yeah.
I have also another question for the PR,
Mhm.
how hard would it be to add some environmental, or do you call it, secrets to the payload? Because there is a JSON.
For the values, you mean? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, it should basically be the same as for the webhook configuration. So as everything is in place, I think it's not that hard.
Okay.
So we have already the endpoints to fetch secrets, yes, the secrets, and also this overlay thingy is also already done. So it should be doable in short time.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yes, I will continue.
Yes.
Okay. Which screen is the right one? This one. Okay. So let's start with the next one. Next topics in the bridge. This one are still in review and are not merged, but yeah, they are pretty done. So let's go to the first one, the secret selection. In the bridge before, we just had a static. We had static items here, just these three, and they were hard coded in the bridge. And now we changed it that the scopes here are fetched from the backend. So if I just modify our config we have for the scopes, and maybe add here another scope, just a custom scope or something, then this data should be, or a new scope should be shown here. This will take some time, as I realized. So I guess, yeah, okay, it's already here. So my scope, and yeah, this is then added and can be used for whatever. So this is now fetched by the backend. There's a new endpoint for the secret service. And yeah, this is now dynamic and not hard-coded anymore. Any questions to that feature? Maybe to mention, this is also the first full stack issue. So I implemented the bridge and the secret service part. So yeah, just to mention. If there are no questions, I will go to the next one. For the OpenID login and logout, yeah, for OpenID flow, we had some problems with the latest release because we added some content security policies. The logout did not work anymore if there was an end session endpoint provided by the SSO provider, because we execute a form, a post to the end session endpoint. And this one was not possible because the security was set that only the website itself can be used for such post requests, so only referring to self. But then, yeah, the SSO provider endpoint was blocked then. This was fixed in a way that the end session endpoint is added to the form action policy. But also this will not fully work for everything because some browsers like Chrome also validate the redirect that is coming from the response of the end session endpoint. So if a company provides some end session endpoint, then redirects to, let's say, Microsoft, this will not be possible because it's a different one than the end session endpoint. And this can is just fixed in a way that you can add another environment variable where you determine which redirect UI should be allowed. So let's say just https login.microsoft.com. And that is then allowed, and the logout is working again because everything is now allowed for the form action. Yeah. Any questions to that? If not, then I will hand over to Ermin.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to show a bug fix that I made for Captain's Bridge. It's regarding the score that is displayed in the heat map. So let's have a look at the issue here. Yeah, it might happen that the score is 89.68, for example. And in this case, for example, it would be a warning state. But since we have used rounded values here in the heat map or evaluation result site, it was showing 90 is smaller than 90 and results warning, which was confusing. And so now we changed this behavior so that we round the result or the score if there are decimals to 2 decimal points. So that should not be confusing anymore.
Quick question
And
to
sure.
that: is it up rounded or rounded and not floored?
Truncated.
So this is
It's floored to 2 decimals.
okay, because I thought about .9999 and that it's rounded and confusing again, maybe.
Oh yeah, true. We'll have to check that one, that special case. Yeah, could be that it's then rounded to. We'll check. Actually, that should then be displayed as 99.99. In that case, we'll check that. Yeah, that's all from my side, and I think I was the last one. So. Handing back to Giovanni or Oleg.
I think Oleg.
Yeah, I just have a quick update. Just a second. Yeah, so I have a quick update about Google Summer of Code. So first of all, we applied. I announced it on social media yesterday. I will also put more information to channels and how it currently looks like. So we have, do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, better to check next time. Yeah, so we created a landing page, which basically provides basic guidelines about what is GSOC, how to apply as contributor, how to apply as a mentor, and summary of the expectations. So what we are currently looking for is more project ideas, potential mentors, and potential contributors. We already had a few potential mentees reaching out, and we have several project ideas posted. So for example, GitOps for Keptn is a scope for Keptn and GitOps, Cap 67 and Cap 69 for Keptn operator, I believe. Then improving Keptn plugin for Backstage, so the project which currently started by Morosala, and it was discussed with Dmitry Matin and a few other contributors at meetings. Then improving GitHub integrations in Keptn, including app authentication service, better integrations with deployments APIs and checks APIs, so that Keptn could push statuses right inside the GitHub interfaces, which is really cool for GitOps and other things. And also integrations with P6 for performance testing and Jenkins pipeline executor service. Another idea we have in mind, so basically what we discussed multiple times, the work of the documentation side. So as we discussed with Mac, having a documentation side engine as one of the project ideas. So I'm yet to push it as pull request, but we have a consensus that we want to have this as project idea. So this is what we have by now. What we need is more potential mentors. And also, if you see any potential project idea you would like to mentor as a team, it may be everything, web UI with JavaScript, Angular, it might be low-level logic, it might be automation, including GitHub Actions. So everything which is code could be a project idea for a Google Summer of Code, and everything that is not a code could be a project idea for LFX mentorship, for example. So if you're potentially interested to mentor someone, it's a good opportunity to join and participate. And it's also great for team building and for community collaboration. So everyone would be welcome. Questions, comments?
Really cool that we are part of this. Awesome.
Well, we are not yet part of that. We have just applied. So the deadline was on Monday. We submitted everything. The next step, actually, the results a description, application draft, which describes what exactly applying means. So if you go to Keptn, we have started a GSOC channel. Again, everyone is welcome to join. We also have login drafts, etc. But what's important, we have Keptn application which sets some expectation how the project would operate. I'm happy to discuss more at the community meeting next week. So I see that we are running out of time, but yeah, we are there, and on March 6th, we will know which mentoring organizations are accepted. And to increase our chances of being accepted, of course, having more project ideas and potential mentors would be something beneficial for that. So, call for action. If you have something in mind, please bring it up. I'm happy to document it for you if needed. So if you just have an idea, etc., just drop it to the chat and we can talk starting from there.
So, like, clarify. So Google has to accept us as potential projects, and then, but then because the participants submit a proposal, right, and they choose from that.
Yes.
That's what they actually choose. Are we? So if they accept us, are we guaranteed to get a certain number of participants? Or...
Yeah, if we are accepted, we are guaranteed to have at least one project if we select a mentee for that. But the number of projects we would get depends on our application. So it's late in the stages in April. After we receive applications from potential mentees, we will be able to request the number of project slots we want to get. Okay. And then Google will make a decision how many slots we actually get. But as I said already in the chat, we have an opportunity to also run projects through LFX mentorship. So even if we, let's say, get 2 slots and have 4 awesome mentees applying to different projects, and we have mentorship capacity, which is also essential to have something running, then we can have 4 projects because shaking some trees and finding the budget is the easiest part of GSOC. The most complicated part is forming mentorship teams. And this is why, if you're interested, you would be more than welcome to participate.
So if somebody is interested in applying for GSOC for Keptn, where should they, because I think we, at least for Jenkins, we encourage them to be coming to our office hours and we help them with their proposal.
So yeah, it's
so
all
which is the Keptn meeting that they should be starting to come to? I know of at least one person that's out on our Slack looking to GSOC.
So basically, I recommend that the same community and developer meetings. Right now, I don't see a point in creating special office hours for Google Summer of Code. We can create that if there is enough traction, if there is enough questions. But right now, I would rather prefer potential candidates to participate in the same community meetings we already have.
So like this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I see that we are already over time. Any questions, comments, or does everyone have to drop?
I had a question, but I think we're already over time, so I'm not sure if I should ask it.
Everyone who wants can just stay online if you want. And thanks to everyone who has to go, and nice demos today. Thanks, everyone.
Nicely done.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye.
So feel free to stay online if you want to continue the discussion. And yeah, we will still have recording and meeting notes.
Okay. Should I ask my question?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes. So I think I have 2 questions. My first question is, apart from getting more contributors to the Keptn project, do we have any objectives outside that for doing GSOC?
Yeah, so doing the GSOC actually has multiple purposes, and it's probably not the most popular opinion, but in my opinion, having more contributors is not the first goal.
Right.
For me, one of the biggest goals is actually community bonding, because when you run a GSOC project, you firstly have people participating. It's fun. You have contributors more engaged with the community, and sometimes you can also get, let's say, peripheral contributors, for example, maintainers of various services, to participate in wider community goals and over time getting more engaged in community activities. So this is what is sometimes more helpful than having more mentees joining the project per se.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah.
And,
But yeah, if you expect the goal to have something delivered, it's nice to have. We had in Jenkins, I've been a mentor since 2016, so we had awesome projects delivered there, including things like GitLab multi-branch source, integration with GitHub checks, etc. All of these projects are really great and widely adopted by users by now, but it's not guaranteed. But having great experience and learning opportunities for mentors and mentees is what we definitely want to have.
okay, and my second question is, are these project ideas limited to GSOC? Or based on what you said, it seems to me that we're looking at a much wider, a bigger goal, basically, just not GSOC. So,
Yep. It doesn't make sense to create an isolated project. Sometimes it's nice, but well, it's basically like common education project. The main goal of Google Summer of Code is showing mentees how to participate in open source. And for that, I think that it's important to actually get them involved in the community as much as possible. So while we want to have projects isolated, I think that having projects targeting important goals in the community is what could help them to get engaged and to help them participating in the community.
right. I think the ideas, what you're saying, sounds really interesting, first of all. And the second thing is, I feel like this might be useful outside GSOC. The only problem is, how do you get the same kind of structure as GSOC? Because you get quality candidates in GSOC, and you get to spend a lot of quality time with them.
Yeah, let me show you a few things. So first of all, GSOC is far from being the only program in the world in terms of mentorship outreach. There are other programs, let's say Outreach, Mozilla hosts Summer of Code, Alibaba hosts Summer of Code, and there is also a project by the Linux Foundation called LFX Mentorship. So maybe you have heard about Community Bridge before. So Community
Right.
Bridge, actually even Keptn participated there a few times. So we had at least 2 students participating. So here you can find Keptn, and you can see familiar faces here. And maybe Mac remembers Ankit because he also participated in the Jenkins community. But yeah, he participated in LFX for Keptn. So we have an opportunity to run this program if needed. Basically, LFX Mentorship is a platform as a service, and all the guidelines we create for GSOC, all the practices, all these project ideas could be reused.
Okay. Okay. And I do not have full idea of LFX mentorship, but can anyone apply to LFX mentorship even if they are not in education?
Yes, and one thing to keep in mind that this year the Google Summer of Code program also changed. So before that it was only for students, whether you're a bachelor, master or PhD student, but now things changed. So you can see that it's not about student anymore. They use new term, GSOC contributor. And actually, it's important because now you can apply not as a student. So they made first steps during coronavirus because not everyone were able to attend because of all the changes, and they went even forward to make a much wider audience eligible. So I'm just looking mentors, as contributors. Maybe it's in a separate document. But yeah, now many other people can apply to GSOC and be mentees there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, change. There's some flexibility in the duration of projects this year that there was not before. There's more flexibility.
Yeah, I just struggle to find it because they reworked the website. I got so used to the previous one, which was around for something like 10 years. Yeah. Yeah. So these are key changes. So we expanded eligibility, multiple sizes. So basically, it was a case even in the previous year. So you had an option to choose, and now, well, last year they just reduced everything to 175. Some mentees were not happy, some organizations were not happy. So now they introduced two options. So pretty much like they do in Google Season of Dogs at the moment. And the same flexibility of timing, it can also be adjusted. But yeah, I think that we will still want to have something sizable. So extending the project to 22 weeks, it creates some concerns for me. But generally, it's possible right now and can be discussed.
Okay, if it's 22 weeks, I see.
Well, it's possible. The problem with that even for 3 months, it's really difficult to keep the project together because some life events always get into picture for students, for mentors. Well, with COVID, etc., it got even worse. So for longer time project, there are higher risks. At the same time, I think that it still makes sense to do that if there is such kind of project of application. De facto, at least in Jenkins, we saw students maintaining their projects for longer time. So maybe one of the approaches would be to have basically 22 weeks, but not of equal workload. Start many things in the beginning, and then basically extend the period so that mentees get more experience with maintenance, with community interaction, etc., for already delivered code. Because it's also a great practice, and this is what Google Summer of Code honestly was lacking before. So
I think what you said sounds really interesting. And the second thing is, as a first as an individual contributor to Keptn, this sounds really exciting to me, basically, because being able to work with someone from the core team and understanding things just really increases the pace at which you can contribute to Keptn. And that is why in my head it was like maybe we could expand it beyond GSOC.
Yeah. So whatever we do here is portable, and we probably should expand. But Google Summer of Code is really a good starting point because the program is 17 years old by now. There is a lot of documentation, a lot of experiences. Many things were basically learned on mistakes. They continuously adjust the program. They collect feedback from org admins, from mentors every year. There are retrospectives at the mentor summits. So as framework, GSOC is really great. And if we could follow this framework in the beginning, I think it would be nice. Then we can introduce some deviations.
Right. Ooh, yeah. So sorry, go on.
Yeah. So yeah, my question to you would be whether you would be potentially interested to participate as a mentor or maybe as a mentee if you're eligible.
I don't know if I'm eligible, to be honest. I've never really applied to GSOC because in my head it was always like it's for students. I'm not a student anymore. I have a full-time job, and I contribute to Keptn as a free time thing basically. So what I'll be interested in is a middle ground, basically, as an individual contributor. And I'm sure there are many people like me I would like to contribute to Keptn. I'm just thinking if uh, the the learning curve of contributing to Keptn can maybe softened if we have something similar to this in our community. The only problem that I see at this point of time is we would need mentors, and we would obviously have many people interested in contributing, but we don't know how much time do we spend because many of them might not contribute at all. So there's a lot
Yeah,
of load on the mentor basically, and that is what I'm worried about.
yeah. So I can provide some insights for Google Summer of Code from previous years. First of all, it depends on how active the student is. But if we take a healthy project where student is active, where the student is engaging, initially Google Summer of Code was a full-time job for students for several months. So they were expected to spend 30 to 40 hours per week. And in order to make it possible, a significant mentorship capacity was needed. So up to 10 hours per week. But the good
Right.
point is that this time can be split across multiple mentors, and for me, it's a must. So I wouldn't even consider running a GSOC program where we have only one mentor. In Jenkins, our recommendation is to have 3 mentors because, well, usually you end up with 2 or less mentors anyway. Because some people drop out, availability changes, job changes, interests sometimes change. So this load can be balanced, but still it's significant time investment from contributors, and yeah, we always have to be explicit.
Right. How much time are we looking at spending, let's
So
say,
right
per
now,
week?
if you take 175 project over 12 weeks, so it's basically
Right.
less than 20 hours per week. And in this case, I would expect that each mentor would spend maybe 3 to 4 hours per week,
Okay.
including project meetings, code reviews, consulting, etc. Sometimes there might be spikes, for example, during the evaluation phases, etc. But the workload on mentors is also reduced with the new format.
Okay. 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 So what I am personally interested in is some kind of a mix because at this point of time, I'm looking at Kubernetes operators, and that's I'm working on webhooks and stuff like that at work, and that is something which interests me. So I was actually looking at the Keptn and GitOps issue, and I was like looking to wrap up the Datadog thing and maybe start looking at the Keptn and GitOps, or there's one more integration I was thinking of writing after taking care of the demo and the documentation and all of that. Might take some time, but that is what I was interested in. So in my head, I was like, I want to do both of them, but I don't know if GSOC provides something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, it's really a good intent, and yeah, if you're interested to participate, you're welcome to. Still, it's quite a big commitment, so there is no blame if someone decides not to. Not at all. But if you're potentially interested, it's probably time to at least maybe propose project idea or just join one of pending projects. Because even now, if you add yourself as a potential mentor, you make no commitment. It's just initial interest. So then you can work with applicants, students, see whether you get excited, whether you want to work with each other. And then sometime in April, during project selection, then it's time when you would have to make a final decision and to make a time commitment. Before that, it's basically just a token.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I think this sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just worried that it won't cut into my coding time because I want to do both. 3 to 4 hours per week sounds reasonable to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So yeah, I think this sounds interesting. Being a mentor sounds interesting to me. I'm just worried that it might cut into the coding time that I get. So my question to you is, if you are a mentor, does that mean you just do consulting? Because I'm sure I don't know many things in Keptn, and I'd obviously consider this as a learning opportunity, a
Yeah,
two-way learning opportunity.
it's also a learning opportunity for mentors. You generally do not do consulting per se. So one of the first things would be to ensure that the student, well, the mentee gets introduced to the community, because usually they are not experienced in contributing to open source. So helping them how to understand how open source works, how community works, getting them introduced to whatever processes, best practices, so would be one of the first things. And then you can organize your work as you wish. So, for example, if you want to try pair coding with student to develop something, to prototype something together, it's perfectly fine. If you want to let student hack and review pull requests, it's also fine. You just need to agree as a team how you proceed. It's an expectation in the GSOC that the most of code is produced by the student, but it doesn't have to be a solo work. The only requirement is that you can basically evaluate the work by the student. So if you want to have a joint project, etc., it's perfectly fine. You just need to ensure that the work clearly separated, and that you do not strictly depend on the part being done by the mentee.
Okay. Okay, that sounds reassuring.
Yeah. Well, we've seen a lot of projects, and whatever happens, there will be org admins who are ready to help with advice, etc. So you won't be handling that alone. And I've been a GSOC org admin for 5 years. Well, this is my 7th year in Google Summer of Code. Yeah, I'm getting old. Yeah, I did see a lot of successful projects, a lot of unsuccessful projects, and usually I spend more time on helping other teams than on mentoring my own project. And this, this is also what keeps me excited, actually. So it's not like I grumble. So I will be here to help in Keptn.
Yeah. Are you currently contributing, Suraj?
I'm working on an integration, Meg. So I was thinking, I was thinking of taking up. So one of the project ideas, the Keptn and GitOps, was something I was thinking of looking into, basically, after I'm wrapped up with the integration. And this was mentioned in GSOC, and the entire idea sounded really interesting to me. And I was like, maybe I could contribute to this thing while being a part of the GSOC community from the Keptn's end. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I was like, I had a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And thanks a lot for all your questions. And yeah, we have a recording of this discussion, so we can just post it to the channel, and it could be a kind of Q&A. So, for example, in Jenkins, we do this office hours on a weekly basis, and we answer any questions potential mentees or mentors may have. And well, I'm happy to do the same here.
Right. What do I have to do? I have 2-3 questions. What do I have to do if I have to apply as a mentor? Is my first question.
Yeah, I can show it to you. Do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Well, as always.
Can you make it a tiny bit bigger?
Works for you?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay.
Can you?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So after that resolution, it gets much worse on GitHub. So here we have GSOC landing. I will post a message, and there is joining as mentor. Basically, I will extend it based on the feedback. But what you need to do at the moment, firstly, stepping up in 2022 project ideas. So there is a list. if you like any of these project ideas, you can just join as potential mentor.
Okay.
Or if you want to propose your own project idea, for example, extending data docs integration service, if something like that in mind, you can just write up some text. We can
Oh yeah,
integrate it.
I do have an idea about that. I was thinking about
Yeah.
adding sumo logic to the integration. That could.
Yep. Well, it's nice. So basically, you can just write up some summary. So what is this project idea about? Some potential use cases, deliverables, and summary what technologies to improve, etc. So I'm still not confident about this format. We could use another one in Jenkins, but well, I created this format over the years, but it's maybe a bit too heavy for Keptn at the moment. So in Jenkins, for example, it looks like that. So there is ID, and each ID has a wide description, links, mandatory quick start, mandatory newbie friendly issues. So right now in
That looks
Keptn,
clean.
sorry.
That looks clean.
Yeah, but yeah, it creates a lot of time, and well, we have extensive guidelines, etc., created over 6 years by now. So I don't want to create such a complex framework in Keptn right away, because I think that it's too complex even for Jenkins at the moment. But I'm definitely taking some best practices. So what I suggest at the moment, yeah, just have a kind of summary that describes what to do, or if you have ideas about good first issues, getting started, etc. Feel free to also put it, but we will be putting everything incrementally.
Right.
And yeah, we can improve the things together, so we don't have to write a massive application right away.
All right. Do we have the link for this?
Yeah, I'll put the
Just
links
get
to the chat
community.
just after this call.
Thank you so much. My second question was, how long does the GSOC last? It was 22 weeks.
It's active phase, but actually, so GSOC has already started for for many organizations, because many students actually reach out early before the official application phase starts, and even in Keptn we had a few students reaching out, or mentees. So I still keep saying students, but yeah, now it's mentees, and yeah, so before these 12 weeks of coding start, there is application phase when potential mentees explore project ideas and come up with their project proposals. So again, we don't write project descriptions. We just write project ideas, which describes what we would like to see in principle, and then potential mentees should explore these ideas and create a proposal which is much more to the ground, including deliverables, scopes, time matching, timeline, etc. Then we discuss these project ideas in the community ideally, and after they apply, we basically rank them and decide which projects we would like to take, find potential mentorship teams, apply and get slots from Google. But the application phase and initial reviews also require some time from mentors, and it would happen basically in March and April.
Okay, and that, when is it starting? Is it starting in May?
I think, well, generally it would start soon after you submit a project idea, because then somebody may discover that and reach out in channels. But yeah, it would be something asynchronous. It would be not that much time consuming. But yeah, basically it happens like in open source. Potential contributors may reach out at any moment. So the same would be with JSOC.
Oh, you mean like once the application deadline, after the application deadline, you can get contributors anytime.
No, you get actually them before. So active students start exploring Google Summer of Code organizations in December, sometimes even earlier. So long before GSOC applications officially open and long before organizations are announced. because, for example, if you want to participate in Jenkins, you know that this is established organization with good track of participation, so it's most likely to be accepted to Google Summer of Code. So you can invest some time and explore in advance to have advantage against other applications. And the same for Keptn. So somebody may explore it right now, and once the organizations are announced on March 6th, if Keptn is accepted, then there would be search in people exploring and probably contributing.
Okay, so we would have students who are accepted in GSOC coming to Keptn, students which are who are interested in Keptn would come to Keptn around end of April. Is that right?
No, it would be early March.
Oh, end of March. Okay.
Yeah, but it would be rather relaxed phase. So somebody asks questions, maybe tries to submitting newcomer-friendly issue pull requests, maybe asking for some feedback in their proposal drafts. But the active and time-consuming phase would start only in May when there is when the projects are announced. Before that, it will be very relaxed.
Okay, got it. I think that answers all of my questions. I will update the markdown, the link that you shared with me, and yeah, just please take it as a tentative thing because I don't know what's going to happen in April or May. So,
well,
but I'll just add my name there.
We live in a real world. Nobody knows what's going to happen, especially with all the news happening last week. And yeah, in 2020, when the world was nuked by COVID restrictions, lockdown, well, I appreciated everyone who participated despite all these events. So everything was a mess because applications was a mess. Nobody knew how the things are going on. All travel was cancelled. Some of the students were unable to participate because the study schedule changed. Some students were unable to participate because they were no longer able to go to the country where they study. So yeah, it was a lot of logistics, a lot of edge cases to focus on, and I appreciate a lot of help we got from the GSOC organizers at Google open source team, all mentors, org admins, students. Yeah, I was so happy to see that GSOC actually happened that year, but yeah, it was super time consuming.
I see.
But yeah, I think it worth it.
All right.
So yeah, then I think we should wrap up because I have a meeting coming up soon.
Thank you so much for explaining all of that to me.
Yeah, so
Crash course on GSOC.
Yeah, what I'll probably do, I will split this video to two parts. So one part will be community meeting up to demos, and another one will be just introduction to Google Summer of Code. So I will post it as a separate video and announce it in the channels, so that everyone can watch if they want. And if you want to put some notes, your experiences to documentation, please go ahead. Because I just created something really simple for now, and we'll be expanding over time.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So then, thanks, Max. Thanks, Suraj, and see you in chat.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.
Have a good day. Thank you.